Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, The Future of Market Research. In today's presentation, we will explore the findings from our first annual Future of Market Research report. My name is Ashley Wolf, and I'm the Marketing Director here at FuelCycle. I'm very excited to have you all with us today. But before we start, I do have a few housekeeping items that I'd like to go over. So if you have any questions at any time throughout today's presentation, please feel free to submit them to either the question or chat box inside the GoToWebinar interface. We will catalog them throughout and come back to them at the end of the presentation. So today's webinar should take about 30 to 35 minutes, and then we, as always, will go into a 10 to 15-minute Q&A session. So with that, I would like to introduce our host today. So first off, we have Ari, who is a Senior Research Associate at FuelCycle. He is a career market researcher with 5 years of experience in clarifying strategic issues and applying qualitative and quantitative methodologies to solve complex client problems. Prior to FuelCycle, Ari came to us from Lieberman Research Worldwide. Thank you for joining us today, Ari.
Thanks so much, Ashley.
Then we have Megan. Megan is a Senior Research Manager at FuelCycle who works with some of the biggest brands in retail, fashion, wireless communications, and healthcare. Megan specializes in consumer psychology and has almost a decade of experience conducting research in the public and private sectors. Thank you for joining us today, Megan.
Happy to be here, Ashley.
And then finally, we have Zoe. Zoe is a Senior Research Associate at FuelCycle. She has spent the last year helping the top Fortune 500 companies listen and learn from consumer behavior to help guide creative business strategies. Thank you for joining us today, Zoe.
Happy to be here, Ashley.
Wonderful. Well, now that I've introduced everyone, I just want to jump into today's presentation. As I mentioned before, this presentation is based on our findings from our first annual Future of Market Research report. So we surveyed hundreds of market research leaders across every industry to discover about market research. So here we will explore how research is used by nearly every department, as well as finding how innovation holds the future of market research in its hands. Then we will explore the tricks of the trade, where we will share which tools most researchers are using and why they continue to look for new solutions. Then we're going to look into future projections, and we will see how the growth of research budgets depends predominantly on a researcher's ability to provide results. And then we'll end with the hero's journey. So we're going to take a deep dive into the current obstacles and opportunities market researchers are facing. So with that, I am going to turn it over to our first presenter, Ari.
Great. Thanks so much, Ashley. So when considering the future of market research, it's important to first understand what market research is. It's an often misunderstood industry. It's not marketing. It's what's done to inform the marketing, among other things. It's not surveys. It's a whole arsenal of methodologies, each with particular strengths and weaknesses, from which we curate customized research designs to produce the most useful insights in service of answering business questions. In short, market research is the prerequisite step that must be taken to inform any serious business decision. Most market researchers work as part of a business insights team on the client side, known as in-house market research, with the second biggest contingent working at a full-service market research provider. To clarify, full service means having the ability to solve business problems without methodological handicap, as opposed to specialists who do one method very well. Full service does not mean doing our own recruiting or having our own proprietary platforms, though we do, but knowing who to partner with and do so if necessary. In this fashion, business insights teams often partner with full service market research providers who in turn partner with vendors with specific expertise or services in order to execute the research they need to fulfill their business objectives. Generally, larger companies will have larger market research units, as this allows them to arrive at more business insights, driving numerous products and advertisements. Smaller companies, if they have a market research department at all, won't churn out insights as dynamically, but being stymied in less bureaucracy, have greater opportunity to escalate their insights to the appropriate channels. Market researchers report being an integral facet of the organization and reveal both actively seeking new technologies and being open to new innovations to expand research objectives. This indicates that market research initiatives will continue to be supported and owned by brands as a natural part of business growth. Market research has proven value among organizations, with the majority of respondents reporting that market research is considered very important. As you can see from the figures, ROI is determined by more than just informing market decisions, but also product itself, as well as other facets of business operations. However, ROI can be difficult to determine at times because research by itself is intangible. It requires a talented team to see the big picture, read in between the lines, and translate data into actionable insights. Without being actionable, the client has nothing to work from. As such, actionable insights are the most invaluable resource companies can have. While often insights will confirm what's client suspects, I have seen them completely turn things on their head and result in products not going to market. While the ROI for this can be difficult to measure, and considering the cost of pulling products and the backlash to the brand from launch failure, the value of doing one's due diligence seems self-evident. In this sense, market research is used not just to validate business decisions, but also to capture the voice of the customer, drive innovation, stay ahead of the competition, and grow revenue. As I mentioned before, it is unsurprising that marketing is the largest benefactor of market research, and product falls at second with 32%. Other departments that use market research noted in other are research and development and engineering. We can think of market research then as not just generating leads, but generating content as well as troubleshooting. It is guided ideation, funneling consumer ideas directly to the client so long as the right questions are asked in the right way. I'm now going to pass the floor to Zoe, who will talk about methods and market research best practices.
Thanks so much, Ari. I love what you said about the role of consumer insights as guided ideation. It's not just about the information, but how the information was gathered and what it can mean for the client's future decision making. In this section, I'm going to talk a little more about how our approach to research impacts the outcome. In terms of software, market researchers are using numerous tools to get the job done. Microsoft Excel is the most commonly used, followed by survey builders like Qualtrics and SurveyMonkey, and statistical tracking tools like Google Analytics. And when asked what technology they'd choose if they could only use one, surveys surface to the top, which makes sense, right? Because they're the traditional tool that's been used since the dawn of our industry. Tools and methods that capture the voice of the consumer, such as consumer communities, came in second place behind surveys, which I think is a strong indication of where we're headed. The comprehensive information that can be gathered by more qualitative approaches has started to earn greater clout as the relationship between the company and the consumer changes. In the early beginnings of commercial advertising, the line of communication from corporations and their customers was more like a one-way street, with companies telling people what they should buy and why. But over the past few decades, with the emergence of the internet and social media, consumers have started talking back. Consumers now have a real say in terms of what they want to see companies doing. Now it's much more of a dialogue. Voice of consumer tools like Community are fast, up-and-coming approaches that cutting-edge companies are already using to stay ahead of the curve and rise above the competition. Based on what I've witnessed in my career as a market researcher and in my life as a consumer, it's my belief that this two-way stream of communication is only going to get louder and faster. If we remember what Ari said about marketing departments being the largest consumer of market research, it would make sense that marketing analytics is found to be the most reliable because it's also likely to be the most collected type of data and therefore the most familiar type of data. But I would encourage companies to start thinking outside the checkbox. Sure, we can amalgamate statistics on purchase behavior and email campaign open rates and work backwards from there to try and figure out what consumers might want in the future. But there are holes in the logic. Even the most well-designed A/B tests for new offerings or ads can only get you so far because oftentimes consumers don't really know why they like what they like and why they do what they do. Your customers may be very smart and very opinionated, but to understand the real cultural and psychological functions behind purchase behavior takes a team of experts to decode. How you approach a research question can affect the data and the meaning of that data. How you approach a research question can make the difference between emerging from your exploration with a one-off data point on preference for, I don't know, white text over blue text, and then gaining a deeper understanding of human needs. It sort of unpleasantly surprises me that drafting research studies is only 9% of the market researcher's daily task load, but there's hope in automation. I think as our industry continues to evolve, we're going to be using more and more automation for those tedious left-brain tasks. This, combined with more streamlined communication between clients and vendors, will allow the space to develop more powerful approaches to research design, as well as more meaningful data analysis. Most organizations are using about 8 market research tools, but we actually saw a minimum of 1 tool and a maximum of up to 50 different tools. We found that the majority of respondents are attempting to keep up with the latest and greatest tools due to this never-ending flow of new market research technologies. While this shows general openness to new technologies, which is a positive thing, our findings also indicate an overload of tools that might not equate to better data or productivity. Being a digital market research software company ourselves, we at FuelCycle have had a hunch about this phenomenon for a while now and have actually been working hard to solve the problem. Our incredible product team has been rapidly moving through checkpoints on our product roadmap and forming all these new relationships with the best of the best digital research technologies. And by developing these partnerships and constantly integrating new tools into our own product, FuelCycle is quickly becoming this epic hub of consumer insights technologies. I'd like to turn it over to Megan Subler, who's going to talk further about the practical implementation of these tools, and of course, the topic everyone really wants to talk about, which is how to get the most value possible while working within your budget.
Thanks, Zoe. So when we talk about the future of market research in terms of technology and budget, what we're expecting to see is a continued rise and advancement of market research technologies, but budgets will stay relatively flat. So market researchers will be struggling to adopt more tools while pretty much working with the same budget. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about the future of market research in terms of balancing these emerging market research tools with budget considerations. In the next year, 81% of organizations plan to adopt new market research technologies. This most commonly includes using new types of automated research like artificial intelligence, machine learning, survey chatbots, and virtual reality. But of course, new technology comes at an added cost. So how important is the investment in new technologies, and what are some of the best ways to ensure that you are investing in the right technologies? First, while it's valuable and necessary to stay up to date on the latest tools, it's important to only invest if it makes sense for your industry and for your organization's business and research objectives. For example, AI chatbots might be extremely helpful for making a survey feel more natural to motive natives like millennials, but if most of your research is among older generations, it might not make sense to use. Or in the case of virtual reality, it might be beneficial in purchase decision-making research because it simulates a naturalistic shopping environment in a controlled setting. But if respondents aren't even comfortable using VR, it's likely not the best approach. Or VR may not even be necessary depending on the product category you're researching. For example, most consumers are highly familiar with mature or low involvement products and services and don't need a VR experience to answer questions about those purchases. But for new product categories or high involvement purchases, VR might be incredibly useful to help respondents imagine themselves in the purchase scenario and answer questions more accurately. Finally, before you adopt, consider the timing. Adopting a new research tool can be costly, especially in the early stages of the technology. Sometimes it's better to be a late adopter and see how a tool is being applied in other industries before jumping in. Plus, in time, the technology will inevitably become more refined and more cost-effective. If you're unsure, many vendors or research suppliers may be open to working with you by offering you trial periods for new survey tools or testing new products at a discounted price. So let's talk more about budget for a minute. Most researchers are working in an organization that dedicates only 10% of their annual budget to market research, and the future doesn't look much better. It's estimated that the average budget will increase by just 1% in the next year. Here at FuelCycle, most of our clients are working under heavy budget constraints, and some even mentioned their budget will be cut even further in the near future. Obviously, in an ideal organization, budget constraints would be loosened and the quality of research, as well as the business decisions the research impacts, would improve. A big research budget means not only that you have access to more tools, but you can afford to offer better incentives to respondents, which has been shown to increase the quality of responses. The volume and depth of research projects would also improve, and you could afford high-quality analytic tools. But that's not to say that you can't get reliable results and deep insights when working on a budget. Ultimately, it's more important on how you spend your budget than what your budget is. We've seen clients with tiny budgets have as much, if not greater, success using our research tools when they get resourceful, creative, and thoughtful about their research. For example, instead of setting up expensive in-home testing for a new catalog, a big box retail client simulated a real catalog experience in a survey by programming page images and these little graphics to click on to turn the page. But why isn't more money dedicated to research? I think it all goes back to the relationship research managers have with their executives. Executives may not see the value in research if they don't understand how insights drive organizational performance. And that's understandable since it's hard to show the counterfactual to your contributions. And by that, I mean it's hard to explicitly show things like because you conducted a concept test, your company was able to put a product on the market that wasn't a flop and ended up costing them a lot of money. But it's important for researchers to make the leap from being a data supplier to a strategic insight partner and ultimately a competitive advantage for your organization. When presenting research results, make it strategically oriented and communicate the ROI of research. For example, one of our clients recently received their organization's highest award for the research that they did in our community. They were able to communicate the ROI of their insights to execs by comparing the superior market performance of a product they launched using community research to a similar product they launched in the past. Looking for a baseline measure or benchmark in your organization will clearly show how your research is impactful. So now we want to talk about how we measure our success as researchers. 65% of market researchers measure success by actions taken that are based on their insights, while 20% of market researchers measure their success on being able to answer research objectives. Whereas I think most researchers get a lot of personal satisfaction from meeting their research objectives and generating insights from the data, it's important to take it a step further and also relate the research insights to the business objectives to turn those insights into action. And yes, research and business objectives are different. Insights are only valuable if they directly relate to the business objectives. That's where other internal stakeholders start to see the value and importance of research. We often hear from our clients about how research translates to success, like when one of our retailers did ad testing in our community. The business objective there was to increase purchases, and the research objective was to determine which ad was more appealing. We found that purchase likelihood was much greater when images of families were shown in ads rather than just the products themselves. As a result, they changed their entire ad campaign, and we saw an increase in prospects transitioning to customers after the campaign launch. So now that we've talked about some of our successes, what about the frustrations, particularly when it comes to working with vendors to gather insights? 27% of market researchers are frustrated with vendors' mismanaged expectations. 19% are frustrated by poor communication, and another 19% find frustration in being nickel and dimed by vendors. So I see a lot of overlap between these top sources of frustration with research vendors. Mismanaged expectations and poor communications go hand in hand. The ideal research-vendor relationship is a partnership where both parties are focused on managing expectations to avoid disappointment or promising something out of scope. First, know that vendors like Fuel Cycle are aiming to exceed your expectations and over-deliver, but logistics are often getting in the way. A bit of perspective-taking, transparency, and honesty on the part of both parties goes a long way. Establish clear communication patterns. For example, we schedule weekly calls with our clients and have formal project request forms that outline every aspect of the project so everyone is on the same page from the start. Before a project launches, key information needs to be outlined and given written approval. This includes a timeline for the entire project from start to deliverable due date, budget, sample size, and overall feasibility. Generally, however long you think a project should take or should cost, we recommend budgeting an additional 20%. So if you think a project should take about 10 business days to pull out, make it 12. If you think it will cost $1,000, figure on spending about $1,200. Things come up that are sometimes difficult to predict, like low-quality samples or delays in getting your desired sample size. So having a contingency plan in place, like extra time to refield, are going to buy you time, and it's a win-win. So circling back to what we were talking about earlier, about balancing new research technology and tight budgets, let's talk a little bit more about how budget constraints can hinder your research and what you can do to work within a budget. Today, there are so many useful research tools out there that have really exciting and innovative product pipelines, but of course are costly. It's tempting to think that new equals better, but sometimes you can find research hacks that can get the job done for a fraction of the price. Recently, we were scoping a project with a major entertainment client who was interested in using eye tracking for sentiment analysis. And after going through the costing, realized it was just out of scope for their budget. We were able, however, to provide a lower cost sentiment analysis tool using one of Survey Gizmo's new features that allows respondents to toggle over TV episodes as they're playing to indicate where their eye is drawn and how they feel about what they're watching. Advanced research methodologies like eye tracking are traditionally very expensive, but are now being offered in more stripped down and basic yet reliable forms in free or lower cost survey tools. It's just about being flexible and thinking of creative workarounds or substitutes. So now that we are getting close to the end of our session, today we talked a lot about where market research is headed in the future. There are many exciting new technologies that are emerging that will be adapted for market research, while existing technologies will continue to be refined and become more cost effective. Researchers should continue to make their contributions apparent to executives and show the ROI of research to fight for bigger budgets and take advantage of the full array of tools available to them. I know that was a lot of information, so with that, I'll hand it back over to Ashley for the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Megan. Thank you, everybody. Ari, Zoe, that was such great information, and you know, your knowledge goes far beyond just the numbers that were shared. Just having your own perspective on what's happening really makes those numbers come to life, and it shows how important storytelling is just to getting those hard facts and data at the end of the day. So before we officially go into the Q&A session, I just wanted to remind everybody that if you do have a question and you would like our experts here to answer them, please enter them into the question box in the GoToWebinar interface. But I want to start with the first question that we have. It comes from Lauren, and I believe it's going to go to Zoe for answering. So she asked, how much of market research do you predict will become automated, and how soon do you see this change occurring?
That's a great question, Lauren. You know, I can only speak from my own experience and imagination, but from what I've seen happening here at Fuel Cycle and with some of our partners, I think it's already happening. I personally don't believe that every aspect of market research can be automated, since there are just certain parts of the process that simply require a certain amount of human empathy and creative critical thinking. I think, like in most industries where we've seen automation and AI really take off, market research will find ways to automate those tedious left-brain tasks, the tasks that we researchers can do while listening to a podcast, because it's that mindless and takes that much time to do. Automating those types of tasks will, I think, free up more of our mental energy for the fun, high-skill, strategic stuff.
Yeah, absolutely, Zoe. I don't think market research will ever become fully automated. There's just too many human faculties that it can't reproduce. AI doesn't read in between the lines, as that requires reading tonality. It doesn't tell a story from the data, as you said, Ashley. That requires creativity. AI doesn't put results into a context that's strategic. That requires understanding the big picture. So there are limits. What AI does do is speed up processes that would take humans much longer, allowing for quicker turnaround. You can integrate previous studies and data collected with a current project with alacrity, similar to how a literature review puts current research into conversation with what has been done before it. So I think the future of AI and market research will seek to automate these processes in the very near future, but there are definitely limits to usefulness.
Yeah, I think it's interesting what both of you are saying, and I fully agree that right now in its current capacity, we do face a lot of limitations in terms of what AI can do and reading the human element of research. But I think that also points to huge and enormous amounts of growth that can happen, especially in the qualitative analysis tools that we have. Like right now, I don't think that we're at the point where maybe we would be able to turn to Qualtrics, for example, to analyze open ends for things like sarcasm or tell us what an emoji means or semantics. But I think over time, maybe in the next 10 or 15 years or something, it might advance to the point where some of that can come into play, and maybe AI will start to play a bigger part and be able to take on some of the more human capacities in research analysis. So I think it's an interesting and exciting thing to keep our eye on and keep in mind in the future.
Great, thank you guys. I love that perspective. From each of you, I love how you have all varying kind of perspective again on this question. So we have our next question that comes from Tom, and I believe Megan, it's best if you answer this one first. So he says, you guys found that market research yearly budget increases as little as 1%. Why do you think that is, and how can market researchers demonstrate more value?
Yeah, so I think this goes back a little bit to what I was saying earlier about the ROI on market research being hard to show to executives and other departments getting credited with its success that market research was actually really instrumental in. So when it ends up coming time to divvy up the dollars in an annual budget, more dollars are going to the departments that appear to be the heroes, like advertising or sales and product, when really so many of the key decisions that went to the final product were set up for success by the research department. That's why it's important for market researchers to be self-promoting in their organizations. So, once you send out a report, follow up with the stakeholders and document exactly how the process changed or didn't change as a result of your insights. And so that way, at the end of the day, you can demonstrate your contributions and fight for those bigger budgets. But I think it also has to do a lot with the sheer amount of data that's available now. Organizations now have this constant stream of data from online sources and social media, and when it comes down to making budgeting decisions, executives probably think that they can sort of like double dip and use these data sources like click-through rates or social listening on social media in place of formal market research. So making it clear to executives that these data sources should definitely be a part of market research and are a great place to start and get directional insights is fantastic, but by no means a direct replacement for these more rigorous and reliable methods that we bring to the table.
Wonderful. Thank you. So I have a question from Cherie, and they ask, so moving beyond surveys, what specific tactics do you recommend for gathering information? And they ask, could you provide any examples to that? I don't know who would want to.
Sure, I'll take that one. That's a really good question, and that's something that we think about a lot here at Fuel Cycle as we are, working to develop new partnerships with different technology companies who are providing different values. And I think that something that I've seen in particularly one of my accounts, it's a big beauty company. We do a lot of in-home product tests. And something that we found the most valuable, in addition to survey, is video. So having women, apply products to their face or their hands, or use a perfume or use a shampoo and get in front of the camera and talk about it, because there's something so juicy and amazing about the life and the story that a person can tell through the way that they're telling their story that simply isn't captured via survey. And we have a new partnership with a company called Vox Pop Me, which is actually helping us more quickly type out the words that people are speaking so that we can quickly analyze that type of data in addition to getting a feel for the people.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zoe. So I think that's going to be one of our last questions. So if there's anyone out there that's still kind of on the fence on whether they should submit their questions, please do that now so we can get to them. But, otherwise, please feel free to reach out to us directly. And, if you didn't want to ask it in this kind of more public forum, we'd be happy to connect you directly to one of these experts on our panel today to provide more information. But with that, I just want to thank Megan, Zoe, and Ari for your time today and for sharing so much great insight on what's happening currently in the industry and where it's going. And I just, until next time we have you on again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys to everybody. Have a great rest of your day. And as always, we will have a recording available to all registrants probably by early next week.